Hi everyone, I'm Styleboy, and today we're talking about autism and touch. I basically finished the month of February by reading this book. Reader Steph has entered in the chat. It is called the Luis Ortega Survival Club, and this book is so good, by the way. Oh my god. Very emotional, and I would definitely look up the trigger warnings before reading it. Think of it as John Tucker Must Die, but more serious. The main character of this book is a autistic girl who has select mutism. Look at this, isn't this so cool? And kind of one of the things in this book that is discussed heavily, both in good and bad ways, is the idea of touch. Just a touch of your love. And I feel like this is something that, as an autistic person, gets brought up quite a lot. And the idea of touch and people touching you, I think not only comes down to like a sensory thing, but also comes down to, in general, your comfort. And obviously this differs from person to person, and also differs from situation to situation. So in this video, I kind of want to just like chat about it, about touch, and about what it feels like to be touched, and how it can sometimes be really amazing, and sometimes super soothing, and actually like the best case scenario, and sometimes how it's like a living nightmare. Again, this is all from my perspective, because guess what, kids? Autism is a spectrum. So of course, every single autistic person is going to deal with touch in a completely different way to another. This is not me to say if you have a different experience that's invalid. Hell no! We're just more talking about it from my perspective, and yeah, I think we should get into it, don't you? I think that's one of the things actually about being autistic, is that for us, touch is a very touchy subject. Boom. This is my sunflower lanyard. Oh my god, sunflower lanyard haul. Mine now has the I'm autistic. And if you look on the back, it says something like, do not touch me when I'm in distress. So for a lot of autistic people, the idea of touch is actually very uncomfortable. And I wish I could tell you why. I'm not 100% sure. My idea of this is actually, I think, because of like sensory issues. For some people, which again, this affects into like the clothing that they wear, and affects every single thing, which is like fabrics and the feeling of skin touching your own skin and how it feels. And that can lead to like sensory overload. It can also just be genuinely quite distressing in general, like to be touched, particularly when you're uncomfortable, and we'll get more into that because that's definitely something that I deal with. When you're uncomfortable, just someone like touching you can just make your whole body like tense up, and it's just like, and it can like kind of like lead you into a panic mode, and I hate that. So for me, when touch gets kind of distressing is when I am going through like a meltdown, or when I'm in general just feeling really uncomfortable with someone or something, and someone just decides to touch me. It could be trying to be soothing, which obviously I understand the social rule of touch, like it's supposed to be giving you comfort, but like, hey, you're not like alone and all that stuff. But actually, on the contrary, it can make me feel even more isolated. Ugh, I don't like that. I really don't like that. And it makes me just feel so like, it almost feels in a way gross, if that makes sense. When you're uncomfortable and someone touches you, you just feel kind of like grossed out, not because of their fingers and whatever, like that's not it. I feel like my body feels gross because I didn't want to be touched, and so at the end of the day, it makes me feel like A, my boundaries not being respected, full stop, and B, also that like, I guess isolated, if that makes sense. Like that touch then leads you into a spiral, like a meltdown or a spiral, makes you just feel so uncomfortable. And especially so many social rules about touch can be like, oh my god, there's so many. It really can honestly like make me feel in a way worse. That's like a lot of the time when it comes to people I don't know touching me, or when it comes to people I don't want to touch me still touch me. Particularly when someone asks and they still touch me regardless, when I go no. That's the worst. When I worked in retail, I remember one time, this woman was really mean to me and very passive aggressive because I didn't know the product. I was like, oh, I really don't know. So his tone was very passive aggressive, and then she touched me, I was like, and my body like literally tensed up. I was like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. And the thing is, which is even funnier, I was wearing this and it just was way worse. And so for me, at the end of the day, it just made me feel way worse. And particularly when I'm going through sensory overload, when people decide to touch me. Story time! I remember I was in Heaven, and it was like my first time ever. And if you don't know what Heaven is, it's like a gay nightclub that's huge, but it's literally like white twink overload. Says I am a white twink myself. Basically, it was like my first time going, and I was just overloaded. Like there was so many different thoughts in my head, so many different things. I was so overloaded, and I remember I was just feeling so uncomfortable, so I kind of like took a step back, and someone was trying to flirt with me. And of course, what do people do? They touch you. They like, body language is a thing. Now, we'll get onto that because Someone's trying to flirt with me with body language. I do not mind. But when it came to this situation, it just grossed me. I was like, because again, I'm going through overload. I'm trying to process how I'm feeling, and I want to be kind of like left alone as much as possible. And so for you to touch me, that's also kind of why I would say, especially if you're on the tube, like so many autistic people don't like crowded spaces because there's so many bodies touching you that you just don't know who they are. And also particularly when it comes to a lot of crowded spaces, so such as concerts or such as like train journeys, like the tube, they can get quite cramped and they also can get quite hot. Like the temperature's hot. And you know when you're hot, you get quite sweaty. Anything touching you, even like your clothing, which I get a lot. Like I'm even to the point where like I have to take something off to feel a bit more comfortable. And when you don't get that opportunity and then people just touch you on top of that, it's just so overwhelming and it's so intense. And personally for me at moments, it can lead me to overload or can lead me to panic or maybe to feel so uncomfortable. That's obviously the negative point of touch. Like I'm personally very touchy myself. Obviously we'll get into the positive, but for me, that's just like kind of one aspect that's like very, very key that I need to discuss with that sometimes, and for a lot of autistic people, touch is not great. Like actually it can be quite distressing, quite hurtful, and make people feel a lot worse. So to my neurotypicals out there watching this or anyone else, honestly the best thing to do is just ask like, hey, is it okay if I touch you? Firstly, that's giving consent and autonomy, which is so important. In a world where, especially reading this book, it was actually broke my heart, where oftentimes being autistic, people view as not having autonomy, which is a whole issue within itself. I think it's just something to be aware, just like ask. And this book, there were so many examples of asking, which again, allows that person to have autonomy. However, I am a touchy bitch. I am a person who loves touch, and I have found as I've gotten older and older and older, I actually am someone who really does need touch, particularly by those who I'm very comfortable around. It actually can make me feel 1,000 times better. It can make me feel safer, and it can make me feel, honestly, at home more than anything else. So that's why, for example, like, I love my weighted blanket. This diva right here. Wait, this feels so good. This literally makes me feel so luxurious and rich. Ooh, mama. This basically just feels like a massive hug. For me personally, I love pressure on my body because it makes me feel just so much more soothed and relaxed, and it also makes me feel grounded. It's very weird because oftentimes when I do face like sensory overload and stuff like that, it can either make me feel like I'm light as a feather and floating above ground, which isn't very fun, or it can make me feel like the opposite where I'm just so heavy. Like particularly this part of my body can just feel so heavy and tense and distressed. I've definitely felt that recently at moments where I'm going through something and it just feels so heavy. Or I feel once I go through overload or once I'm through it, it makes me feel just so hollow. That's just the best way to describe it. And so for me, stuff like this really does help. Anything to add pressure onto my body, particularly when I'm feeling hollow, makes me feel grounded and back down to earth and just so soothed and relaxed. I think that's just something that I personally feel like really has helped. And it does help a lot of the time. And even when it comes to other people touch, I love it when they add pressure onto me. Like for example, like I recently, unfortunately, during February, I had a really bad meltdown. Like one of the worst I've had in a while. And I just remember like literally crying and bawling in my mom's arms, and she was literally rubbing my back, and it almost felt at like that point like I could just let go in a way. That's the best way to describe it. She was literally adding pressure onto my back and just kept on rubbing me in circular motions, and it just felt so soothed, honestly just so at ease. And again, like I could let go in a way, and I don't know why. It just felt like I could like just bawl, and sometimes that does really help. Or even just like a supportive hug to just make me feel like I'm less, I guess also less alone. I feel like that's the thing. Like especially when a friend hugs you and whatever, like no matter what, for example, my friend Christian just gives like really tight hugs that almost like squeeze a bit, and they just make me feel so supported. That's just personally for me, it's what I find really helps me feel at ease. Just that, like the hugs. I love hugs. I love giving hugs. And I think also another thing about touch is that a lot of social rules, particularly within our society, comes down to touch. Oftentimes, to me, when friends are comfortable enough to touch me, like put their head on my shoulder or like hold my hand, or like just that like non-sexual intimacy. It really makes me feel like I'm doing something right. Of course, like touch doesn't equal just that. Obviously that's like quality time and obviously different things. But I think when people feel comfortable enough to show me touch within their forms of intimacy, it just makes me feel so good, because it makes me then feel more comfortable to do so. And it's something that I actually really do enjoy. Like I remember growing up, like my friends didn't really want to touch, like that wasn't their thing. And so now to have friends who are very like touchy, whether it's like holding each other's hands or giving each other hugs, leaning on each other's shoulders, like supportive elements. That's what I mean by I feel supported, because you just feel like, hey, like I know you're my friend and I'm your friend, and there's something about it that makes me feel less alone, you know? And I think to me it is one of something that makes me just feel loved. Yes, I know that sometimes being autistic, touch can be very distressing, but it also can be incredible for me personally. I just think that's part of who I am. It's something that I thoroughly enjoy. And again, each autistic person is different. Of course, every person is different. Some people may not like touch, some people may not even like PDA. I fucking love it. I'm very much like that. But I think when it comes down to, how to describe it? When it comes down to physical forms of intimacy, like touching and whatever, I think the best thing to do is just ask someone what they're feeling. Do they feel comfortable doing that? Do they want that? I think that's the best thing to do. Because they'll be honest, whether they're like, yes, I want to do it, no, I don't. You know, each person is different. And I think that's the best thing to do, is just simply ask. I think that's kind of it. Honestly, this is a pretty quick video. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure you subscribe, because we're gonna get into more pop culture stuff. I'm really, really excited for it. And yeah, I shall see you guys in 2 weeks time for another new video. Love y'all. Bye.